When my parents forgot to book my hotel room for a massive family vacation, my sister smirked and whispered, "We reserved rooms for me, my husband, and my child. We're the real family." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just calmly looked at the receptionist, said, "Then I'll leave," turned on my heel, and walked out into the pouring rain. Everyone thought I was just throwing a childish tantrum. They figured I'd crawl back, begging for a spot on the floor. But hours later, as I sat in a stunning, private luxury villa ignoring dozens of their frantic, desperate phone calls, something unthinkable happened. My phone buzzed with a text from my billionaire grandfather that changed everything, leaving my entire toxic family absolutely speechless. If you want to see how a forgotten hotel room completely flipped a multi-million-dollar inheritance, follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Emily Grace, and at 32 years old, I've finally learned that you can't buy a place in a family that views you as an afterthought. For as long as I can remember, I was the invisible daughter. My parents operated under a simple, unspoken rule. My younger sister, Vanessa, was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the corporate workhorse meant to quietly foot the bill. Vanessa's life was an endless parade of celebrations funded by our parents, from her lavish wedding to the constant bailouts for her husband's failed business ventures. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my career as a senior financial asset manager, building my own stability from scratch. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandfather, Arthur. He was a self-made man who built our family's real estate legacy, and he was the only one who valued my work ethic and sharp mind. When his 80th birthday approached, my parents and Vanessa insisted on planning a massive, multi-generation trip to a luxury mountain resort. They talked endlessly about family unity and creating lasting memories. Eager to finally bridge the gap between us and make my grandfather proud, I gladly contributed thousands of dollars to help subsidize the trip's overall expenses. I packed my bags believing that, for once, we were going to be a real, united family. I had no idea that the moment we stepped into that resort lobby, the fragile illusion I had spent my entire life trying to maintain was about to be brutally shattered. The mountain air was crisp, and the resort lobby was absolutely stunning, glowing with warm timber beams and a massive stone fireplace. But the warmth stopped the moment my family gathered at the front desk to claim our room keys. I stood by with my suitcase, watching my parents and Vanessa enthusiastically hand over their IDs. The clerk clicked away on her keyboard, printing out key cards for my parents' executive suite and another set for Vanessa's luxury family cabin. Then, the clerk looked up at me, checking her screen again with a slight frown. "And your name, ma'am?" she asked politely. I told her it was Emily Grace. She typed it in, paused, and shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I don't see a reservation under Emily Grace or any additional rooms under the family booking." I froze, assuming it was a minor clerical error. I turned to my mother, expecting her to pull out a confirmation email. Instead, she avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by the resort's brochure stand. My father shifted his weight, clearing his throat nervously. "Oh, that's strange," he said, his voice entirely lacking any real surprise or urgency. There must have been some sort of system glitch with the booking site. Vanessa didn't even pretend to look concerned. She simply smirked, adjusting her designer handbag. There was no panic in their eyes, no outrage on my behalf. As I stared at my parents' completely unbothered faces, a cold, sickening realization began to settle deep in my chest. This wasn't an accidental mistake by the hotel or a technical glitch. They had deliberately omitted me from the planning, leaving me entirely stranded while they enjoyed the luxury I had helped pay for. The silence in the lobby hung heavy until Vanessa broke it with a sharp, mocking laugh. She stepped closer, looking at me with absolute disdain. "Well, Emily Grace, it's not our fault the system messed up," she said, her voice dripping with malice. Then she crossed her arms and uttered the words that cut straight to the bone. "We reserved rooms for me, my husband, and my child. We're the real family. You're an adult, so you'll just have to figure it out yourself." She even suggested I could sleep in a rental car or go find some cheap, rundown motel miles down the highway. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to check her cruelty. But my mother just looked away, and my father muttered something about not wanting to ruin the trip with drama. They weren't going to stand up for me. They never had. Vanessa's smug smile told me everything I needed to know. She thought she had successfully humiliated me into begging for a corner of their floor. Instead of crying or throwing a tantrum, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I looked at the three of them, completely calm, and said, "Then I'll leave." I turned my back on them, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and walked straight out of the luxury resort lobby. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa laughing, assuming I was throwing a childish tantrum and would come crawling back. They had no idea that when I walked out those doors, I was walking out on their manipulation for good. I marched out to my car, tossed my luggage into the trunk, and started the engine. The engine's roar was a comforting contrast to the suffocating silence of that lobby. I wasn't going to let them ruin my night. Using my phone, I quickly located a secluded, ultra-luxury private cabin just 10 minutes down the road. It was expensive, but I didn't care. I booked it instantly. As soon as I checked in, I unpacked, poured myself a glass of wine, and set my phone to total silence. I needed to completely disconnect from their toxic energy. Meanwhile, back at the main resort, the dynamic was about to shift dramatically. A few hours later, my grandfather Arthur finally arrived, eager to celebrate his milestone birthday. He walked into the resort's upscale restaurant where my parents and Vanessa were already seated for dinner. Arthur smiled, greeting everyone warmly, but as he pulled out his chair, his eyes immediately swept the table. His smile faded. He looked at my parents, then at Vanessa, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He had expected to see me sitting right there by his side. After all, I was the one who managed his daily medical appointments and called him every single morning to check on him. "Where is Emily Grace?" Arthur asked, his sharp voice cutting right through the ambient noise of the restaurant. My parents froze, their forks hovering midair. Vanessa awkwardly cleared her throat, suddenly looking very small beneath his intense, searching gaze. They realized they had a massive problem. My parents tried to play it off, stuttering a clumsy lie about me having a sudden corporate emergency that forced me to stay behind. But Arthur hadn't built a real estate empire by being gullible. He knew my work ethic, and he knew I would never miss his milestone birthday for a routine meeting. Seeing through their nervous glances and vague explanations, he stood up from the table without touching his food. He marched straight to the front reception desk, where he politely but firmly demanded to see the master lodging manifest for the Whitaker family booking. The resort manager, recognizing his name, quickly pulled up the digital logs. The manager confirmed that not only was there no room for me, but my parents had explicitly called weeks ago to cancel my specific room allocation to cut down their total bill. Arthur's face hardened into a mask of pure, quiet fury. He didn't scream or make a scene. He simply walked back to his suite and let the storm brew. Meanwhile, over at my private cabin, I finally woke up from a peaceful rest and glanced at my phone. The screen was completely flooded with dozens of missed calls, urgent voicemails, and frantic text messages from my mother and Vanessa. The tone of their texts had completely flipped from arrogant mockery to utter desperation. They were begging me to answer, pleading with me to come back to the resort immediately, and demanding to know exactly where I was. The golden child and her enablers had finally realized that their cruel little game had backfired spectacularly. Arthur didn't waste a single moment. The next morning, he called an emergency family meeting in the center of the resort lobby, forcing my parents and Vanessa to face him. They stood there trembling, realizing the truth was out. But they had absolutely no idea how deep the consequences were about to cut. Arthur looked at them with pure disgust, then turned to his briefcase and pulled out a set of legal documents. "You thought you were being clever, saving a few dollars by tossing Emily Grace aside," Arthur said, his voice deadly quiet. "You claimed Vanessa and her family are the real family. Well, let me show you how reality works." With absolute precision, he dropped a massive financial bombshell that left them utterly speechless. He revealed that 3 months ago, due to his declining health, he had quietly restructured his entire real estate empire and family business. He hadn't left it to my parents, and he certainly hadn't left it to Vanessa. Instead, he had placed everything into an unamendable family trust, and because of my background as a senior financial asset manager, he had named me as the sole,